Family opens mom's coffin before her funeral and sees she's alive. Can you imagine losing a loved one and while you're at their funeral, they wake up and ask you to open their coffin? It seems unimaginable, but believe me, it's happened. Today's story tells of an event as surprising as it is disturbing that took place just a few weeks ago in the region of Babahoyo, Ecuador. An event that will make even the most skeptical person's hair stand on end and that'll make you believe in miracles again, even if it is for only a few minutes. It all started on June 9, 2023 when Bella Montoya, an elderly woman over 90 years old, was in the backyard of her house watering her plants. Bella was an elderly woman and had her share of health problems, the usual for someone her age, but she had never been seriously ill nor had she ever had to undergo surgery in a hospital. It was impossible to imagine how much her luck and health would change in just a few hours. Montoya was a proud mother of 5 children and 8 grandchildren, the last of whom was only 8 months old and all of whom lived in the same neighborhood in Babahoyo. It was a large family living in a humble place, but they were happy there and didn't need much to live and feel fortunate with what life had given them. They all worked in the family business selling groceries at a stall in the market called Doña Bella. Their work didn't make them rich, far from it, but with what they earned daily between all of them, they could survive. Mrs. Montoya became head of the family after her husband, Don Julian, died years ago from lung cancer. Everyone respected and loved her, so when Doña Bella felt ill or needed something, everyone rushed to her aid. However, the morning this story took place, the family was working at the market and couldn't help her as quickly as they would have liked. As I mentioned earlier, Bella Montoya was watering the plants in her yard, something she always did every morning and which brought her a great deal of peace. However, when she bent down to water one of her rose bushes, the old woman noticed a stabbing pain in her chest that completely paralyzed her. She never experienced that kind of pain before. Doña Bella became very frightened and tried to sit down on a nearby chair to catch her breath and see if the pain would subside, but it didn't. The pain increased and she began to feel the entire right side of her body become paralyzed. Bella felt her whole body go numb and that made her panic. The old woman couldn't remember if any of her children were at home. She remembered they had to leave very early that morning to go to the market to pick up new merchandise, but she hoped that one of them returned early. "Oh God, I can't feel my arm or my hand. It hurts so much. Gilbert, Ana Pedro, is anyone home? Help me, please. I think I'm dying," shouted the woman with all her strength so that someone would hear her and come to her aid. But no one could hear her. The house was empty and she was getting worse and worse. The pain in her chest kept increasing, and although she tried her best to stay awake while calling for help, finally the pain got the better of her and she lost consciousness. Luckily, her eldest son Gilbert arrived home just 15 minutes after the woman lost consciousness and was able to help her. "Mom, can you hear me? What happened to you? Mom, answer me, please!" Gilbert shouted as loudly as he could while gently slapping her cheek to get her to wake up, but it had no effect. His mother was still unconscious and didn't seem to react to any stimuli. When he checked her pulse, he could see that her heart was still beating, but at such a slow rate that it was almost imperceptible. Gilbert was very frightened to see his mother in such a state, and as he knew that the ambulance would take a long time to arrive, he decided to take her to the nearest hospital himself so that she could be treated as soon as possible. He carried his mother in his arms and carried her to the back seat of his truck. He carefully laid her down and then hurried to the hospital. There was no time to waste. His mother was dying and he had to do everything he could to prevent it. Gilbert drove at full speed and took his mother to the Martinicaza Hospital in Babahoyo, Ecuador. When he arrived there, a couple of nurses rushed his mother on a stretcher to attend her. Balbaran was grief-stricken, and while waiting in the emergency corridor, he called the rest of his siblings to tell them what had just happened. While attending to Bella, Gilbert advised the doctors that Montoya suffered from hypertension and heart problems, but had never suffered any major pain. "My mother's a very strong woman. She has to take pills for her blood pressure and heart, but like all people her age, I don't know what could have happened to her. Save my mother, please. She's the pillar of our family," he pleaded in tears to the nurses who attended her in the emergency room. Unfortunately, none of them could tell him what he was hoping to hear. "As strong as his mother is, we can't forget she's 93 years old. At that age, any day could be her last. I'm sorry, but we can only wait for the doctor who's treating her to come out and inform us of her condition. I'm sorry I can't tell you anything else, sir," said one of the nurses, trying to console him but not succeeding. Unfortunately, after more than an hour of agonized waiting, the doctors who attended Bella Montoya could only confirm her death and offer their condolences. "Sadly, your mother passed away from a heart attack. At her age and given the length of time she'd been unconscious, the damage caused was too great and it proved impossible to revive her. We're very sorry for your loss," communicated hospital officials to Montoya's family. "Thank you for trying, doctor. I know you'll have done everything possible to save my mom," said Gilbert to the doctors, broken with grief at the news. After preparing all the hospital paperwork and signing the death certificate stating that Bella Montoya had died of a heart attack, the family set about preparing for her funeral the next day. However, none of them could have imagined the surprising events that would take place that very day. All of Bella Montoya's children contributed to pay for the funeral expenses, which would be very modest and would be held in the small village church. Bella was a very religious woman and was a regular at her parish. Faith was very important to her and her family knew it. Her last farewell could not be otherwise, and the family invested all their savings so that it could be carried out as she would have wanted. "I couldn't care less about the money right now, sister. She's our mother and she deserves a funeral to match. I know she would be proud, Gilbert told his sister Anna. She and Gilbert were the oldest of 5 siblings and the head of the household now that their mother was gone. I agree with you, dear brother. She's the one who matters now. Our mother deserves everything, answered Anna, trying to hold back her tears and hugging her brother tightly. On the morning of the following day, and without having finished assimilating what had happened, Bella Montoya's funeral began. The religious ceremony inside the church was attended only by relatives and close friends of the family, but when they left carrying the coffin on their shoulders to bury her in the cemetery, they discovered that all the neighbors had wanted to pay their respects to Bella Montoya and say their last goodbye. She was a great woman. What a great sorrow, said a neighbor as the coffin passed by. The neighborhood will never be the same without the humor and joy of Bella Montoya. God bless her, shouted another excited neighbor, holding back her tears with a black handkerchief. The family thanked the neighborhood for their support and continued on their way to the cemetery in absolute silence. Everything was going according to plan until the impossible happened. Knock, knock, knock. Dry knocks coming from inside the coffin broke the silence. Everyone looked at each other from disbelief. It's coming from inside the coffin, it's Montoya's ghost, said one of the neighbors, pointing to the coffin with a terrified look. Don't talk nonsense, it can't possibly come from there, it must have been our imagination, we're all tired, Gilbert replied, very annoyed, trying to ignore the neighbor's comment. Come on, let's keep walking, it's still a long way to the cemetery. Everyone started walking again, trying to ignore what had happened, when suddenly the sound came again, this time louder, the knocking. This time there was no doubt, the sound was coming from inside the coffin. Everyone heard the knocking loud and clear. Get him on the ground, come on, hurry up! Let's open it and find out what's all about, Gilbert shouted to his brothers to lower the coffin to the ground so they could check if their mother was really alive, or if on the contrary it was someone trying to play a bad joke on them. But it was not a practical joke but a real miracle. The old woman who had been declared dead only a few hours ago had started banging on the wooden surface of the coffin with all her might in the hope that someone would hear her, and so they did. Montoya's family quickly opened the coffin and was surprised to see the elderly woman was still alive. No one could believe that Montoya was still breathing, even though she'd been declared dead. The situation was especially frightening because the hospital had even given them a death certificate specifying the cause and time of death. No one understood what was happening. Bella Montoya's alive, we have to help her out of there, said one of her sons after looking inside the coffin and seeing that the grandmother had a pulse and was breathing heavily. Luckily, one of the present at the burial was able to record everything with his cell phone, and the moment they opened the coffin and discovered the old woman alive is now circulating through social networks. The whole world witnessed Montoya's miracle, or at least that's what they called it after becoming a viral video in just a few hours. And as soon as they realized Montoya was still alive, the family rushed to call the emergency services for help and an ambulance. The person recording the video was heard to say, "We called 911, but they told us they would call us back because there's no ambulance available right now." Montoya did not receive immediate medical attention, but her family did everything they could to help her and make her feel better. The woman was very disoriented and barely opened her eyes, but didn't seem to feel any pain and even seemed to react to hearing her children's voices. Finally, half an hour after being taken out of the coffin and apparently stable, an ambulance took her to the hospital for immediate treatment and to find out what her state of health was. For her family and everyone present at the funeral, seeing her breathing after being declared dead and almost buried was nothing short of a miracle. The elderly woman received treatment in the hospital's intensive care unit at the same time as her video began to become internet famous and the most viewed video in a matter of hours. The impact of the video was so great that even the local media picked up on the unusual incident and broadcast the news all over the country. My mom is on oxygen, her heart is stable and everything indicates she'll recover. The doctor pinched her hand and she reacted. According to what I've been told, that is a good sign because it means she's reacting little by little, her son revealed to one of the local journalists who went to the hospital to interview the family. He added at the end, "Now I only ask that my mother's health improves. I want her alive and by my side." As news of Montoya's miracle circulated locally, people demanded an investigation of what happened from the hospital that treated her. Both the public and the family wanted a reasonable explanation for what happened and the fact that their mother was alive after the doctors declared her dead the day before. Today, a month after the event, it is still unclear what happened. The hospital declined to make any official statement, but some reports by medical experts suggest that what happened to Montoya is that she suffered a case of catalepsy. Catalepsy is a rare syndrome during which the body remains unresponsive for prolonged periods of time, making the sufferer appear dead. Currently, Bella Montoya has returned to live at home with her family and is stable. Her heart is delicate, but now she's under much stricter medical control that will prevent her from suffering another heart attack. Her family is immensely happy to have her back with them and enjoy her company, especially after they were about to bury her alive and thought she had left them forever. Her story reminds us that life is very short and that we should enjoy our loved ones to the fullest, because any day can be the last, although that's not the case of the miraculous Bella Montoya. Did you like this touching and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave your comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for your cooperation.